What's up, everybody? Today is, what day is it? Tuesday? Tuesday, March 11th. You're listening to Outdoor Cats. My name is Bill Shaner, as always. I'm joined by my lovely co-host. Oh, boy. Should have done my warm-up exercises today, huh? My lovely co-host, Chris Rabarge. Tell the people at home a little bit about how you're doing.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I have my window open and that and blowing in coming in through the window are the dulcet sounds of a downtown afternoon and that great spring air smell. So been able to wash some of the other, whatever was dragging me down today off with that.
Yeah.
So it's a great time of year. And I'm trying to remember that.
Simply the best. Nothing like early spring.
Yeah.
There really is nothing like early spring.
No,
all right.
It really is.
I fell into a little bit of a doom scrolling, doomerism hole this morning, because how can you fucking not? I mean, it's not what we're talking about today or anything, but just off the top, want to say that the detention is such a limiting word for what happened to this Columbia University activist, Mahmoud Khalil, who was just swept out of his home by ICE in the middle of the night for no crime at all, just having had supported Palestinians in the past, to be made an example of by this new Trump administration. And is like really, really setting a new precedent for how these powers of deportation and detention can be employed, and it's really scary. So I spent a good portion of today kind of getting freaked out, getting a little scared,
Yeah, I don't blame you. I have been, for better or for worse, I guess, trying to replace the feeling of terror with the feeling of anger, which I generally feel a little more comfortable sitting in. But yeah, I mean, this is really, really bad. And yeah, just to kind of fill in a few more things. So Mahmoud is a student at Columbia University, and worked on the pro-Palestinian protests that took place there, including the negotiations around their conclusion. Mahmoud is also Palestinian himself, which I don't think is or should be a prerequisite to calling for the end of a genocide, but certainly when it is a genocide of your own people, I can imagine. I mean, I've spoken to Palestinians about this. I know how many members of their family they've lost. It hits a little extra. And I don't know what else to call it besides an abduction or a kidnapping. It is an extra legal abduction. He has not been charged with or accused of any crime. And they have held him in detention, apparently in Louisiana, which itself was hard information to find. But he's being held away from his family. He's being held away from his legal counsel. And he's a green card holder. He is a legal resident alien. And it should not be possible to do this to him, like legally possible. And yet here we are watching it happen, and him facing the potential deportation back to a place where a genocide is happening. And it's really fucked up. And it's to say the least. I think for people who don't fully have the context of how unprecedented this is, I cannot think of another example of this happening before. Like, this is a new thing that we have not seen. It is a new low in an interpretation of the law.
The rhetoric coming out of the administration isn't focusing on any sort of crime, or even they're not even like pretending to make up a crime here. If you are sympathetic to the genocide of the Palestinian people, then that's grounds for deportation. And Trump himself said, first of many to come. If ever there was a wake-up call that we are not living in a country that is friendly to us, and that we desperately, desperately need strong, well-connected communities alive with solidarity who can put up a meaningful resistance when the goons come knocking for one of us, right? It can feel so helpless and hopeless to just sort of consume this online, but like there are things that we can and should be doing about this right now. I think that a call or an email, particularly to Jim McGovern's office, goes a long way in this situation. It needs to be made clear to him that this is not something that he can afford to be quiet on. And he's one of the least quiet people in Congress on general Israel stuff. I was asking around today about demonstrations coming up. If anybody knows of anything happening in the Worcester area or in Boston or in Providence, drop us a email or comment or whatever. We'll reshare it. But you got to do something.
I mean, this should scare you, but don't let it scare you into inaction. I guess is what I would say. This is a really good time to be pressuring your representatives in Congress, because if this can happen, what the response is to something like this happening that has not happened before will dictate, I think, the speed and the severity of what happens next. And we need to all be making it abundantly clear that this is absolutely unacceptable and that it needs to be fixed like immediately. And that means I would encourage you to be saying that, when you talk to people about it. If you've been kind of, quieter about the complexities of, world events, this is a very simple one. This is a guy who's been kidnapped by a violence-doing arm of the federal government, who has been accused of no crime. So
for purely ideological reasons. Yeah.
Yes, for purely ideological reasons.
I think that germane to the topic of today's post, I think this is a very good sort of bellwether for everyone to consider the limits of posting. This is a situation in which posting gets you nowhere, and in fact probably helps the panic that Trump is very obviously trying to induce with doing this. Whereas taking more direct action, like showing up on the street or directly contacting people with some power in the state to do something like that, helps. Posting and consuming posts only leads you to like an ambient misery, and sort of robs you of your agency. And in fact, maybe that's the point, because so much of the way that the internet is getting used right now is bad and for evil and to the benefit of evil people.
Yeah, we're all thinking about and hungry for more organic and probably local spaces where we can do this. I've been doing a little research into one that I'm going to be so excited to talk a little bit about after we wrap this interview. But yeah, thinking about places that are maybe more manageable size and local and organic and not under corporate capture. And that may mean that we have to build some of those spaces or bring some back into existence that used to exist. So, yeah, with that, here's Joanne.
Joanne McNeil is the LA-based writer who hails originally from the great Granite State to our north, New Hampshire. She is the author of the 2020 Internet History Lurking, How a Person Became a User, which I loved, and the 2023 New Yorker Year-End Lister Wrong Way, a near-future sci-fi novel about quote-unquote driverless cars, which I also loved. She wrote in December for Neiman Lab, a prediction for journalism in 2025, which I did not love, that there will be a great unfollowing for Substack and Patreon-based independent journalism outlets. She predicts this because, and this is really why we wanted to have her on, the internet has become an increasingly terrible sea of unusable slop. My words. Her words. The reason I think it will happen is that the internet itself is now flooded with careless content, AI generated or otherwise, and the effort to sift through it doesn't pay off like it used to for readers and listeners. I think we can all agree this is true. She also writes, running an independent newsletter or a podcast is often the fallback of many fallback plans for journalists. Also true, can personally vouch. And finally, she writes, where will these journalists go when the subscribers fall to a level that is no longer sustainable? Joanne, I have no idea. I'm already on the fallback plan. There's no fallback after the fallback plan. Joanne, so 2 questions. First question, why is the internet so goddamn awful? Second question, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the kind intro. One little fact check there. I'm originally from Brockton.
No,
I was living in New
up.
Hampshire. It's okay. I just wanted to make sure, shout out to Brockton. I was living in New Hampshire for a while, so I have very deep New England roots in addition to being in California.
Brockton.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brockton rocks.
Brockton is basically like the Worcester that could beat Worcester up.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Yes. And that's why I also love reading the newsletter, because I really wish there was a Brockton sucks, but I love it. I really, really wish that existed. But
yeah.
So, I mean, the internet, it absolutely sucks right now. And I for a long time, I've tried to kind of temper my despair and point to areas where creativity is still flourishing, and there certainly are examples. And I mean, independent podcasts and independent newsletters are seriously the long-standing example, the zine culture being still alive through these publications, in your case, the alt weekly tradition being kept alive.
Yes. And
at the same time, I feel like we have to be realistic here about what we really want out of these publications and how many people have it in them to continue. So, I mean, a conversation I've been having with friends is just do you go to that fallback plan? Do you start that Substack and put all of your energy into attracting followers, making sure that they're on a paid plan, but then again, not paywalling all of your content so that people can't see the quality of your writing or not? And then the other element of that is it's so individualistic that in your case, Bill, you have a team, you have people who are in community with you as you develop this project, this publication and podcast and broadcast. But if you're going it alone, you're counting on it that you're never going to get sick. Someone close to you isn't going to pass away, that you will never have to be away from this job for, say, 4 weeks. That could decimate your followers if you just disappear. And I don't think any one of us should just take that gamble. I really feel like we need to figure out more co-op models. That said, there are a lot of friends who I feel like are that personality, have that charisma, have that talent. And this is an option. I'm not saying that what they're doing isn't valid. It's more that it's we have to be realistic that there are risks involved. And I can support you if you're doing this, but I also strongly feel like we're setting ourselves up for just the next rung of failures. And I'm not like, that's why with my newsletter, I am on Substack, and I'm kind of embarrassed now to say it because obviously Substack is full of fools, like bigoted fools. And the company itself, unfortunately, it's free. My Substack is free. I can't port it someplace else without paying. And I already pay for so much stuff in addition to LA rent. Like, I can't just like pay out of pocket for a newsletter just for the luxury of saying that I'm not on Substack anymore. Because I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, which is a Meta property. I'm on all of these incredibly toxic platforms because I need some awareness, even if I'm one of those writers who tends to be a little too cool for school when it comes to promoting themselves. Like, I'm not like, I don't do the super aggressive, like, follow me. I'll do a little bit every once in a while, but I have never gone like super gung-ho influencer media personality. But yeah, it's just like, I think these conversations are helpful to make sure that like people's expectations are in check, that like you can throw yourself into building a following and you might have the talent, but say you're building a following in a subject that has just been completely sidestepped because like say in like 2022 you were a Ukraine expert and just like, oh my gosh, CNN's calling me to be on TV, and like it might seem like everyone in the world wants to know about Ukraine and the history of Ukraine. Well, guess what? In 2025, there are a lot of A1 news stories that are not Ukraine, and it might be very hard for you to retain that following. So these are just the things to prepare for.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of very interesting points in that, but the main thing I couldn't stop thinking about while you were breaking that down was like this lingering thought in the back of my head that like what I'm participating in, what me and Chris are doing here with this podcast that appears on a Substack that I am currently paying my rent with right now, but that could change at any moment, is just like the gigification of an industry that and like you can't really chart a path to like a sustainable like institution like alt weeklies and newspapers used to be that employ people like us, and there's no conceivable way of sort of using these platforms to do that. As much as I like, my goal has been since I started this was to like sort of try to rebuild an alt weekly, and after 4 years I have gotten myself as far as sustaining one full-time employee. And I think that like for most enterprises on Substack or Patreon, like it really is like one or two people tops can make a living off of a media property, where it used to be like hundreds of people. So I wouldn't necessarily say we're winning in that regard. And the local journalism is like even worse than like national journalism or anything in between. I mean, like local journal, it's crazy. The Telegram and Gazette in Worcester is the biggest employer of journalists still, even though it's like a fifth the size it was in like 2010 even.
Well, wait a minute though, Bill. I just read in Mass Live that Mass Live was nominated for a record number 35 regional journalism awards. Mass Live, you may know if you look at it every day, known for overtly just advertising the lottery by printing like 5 stories about people that won the lottery, openly promoting sports gambling through affiliate links, I don't know. That sounds like pretty good local journalism.
Listen, I know all about regional journalism awards. I'm like a 4-time first place recipient of regional journalism awards. If you pay the entry fee, which my company used to do at Worcester Magazine and other places, you're gonna get some sort of award. You know, it might not be first, but like just pay. You basically pay for the plaque. Not that I'm honored, Nempa, really. Nempa, I'm really honored. But you know, that doesn't mean anything.
Okay, I have a Save Media idea just off the spot. Like, it sounds like you need a Worcester Sucks Awards. And just like entry fee of $100.
Yes. Worcester Sucks Best City Councilor Award. There's 11 prizes to be handed out. Each one in the entry fee is $500. Yeah.
The tallest city councilor, the best style.
Not to get too towny about it, but that's basically what the mayor does with keys to the city. Like it used to be that a key to the city was like an actual like thing that denoted your importance to the community. But our current mayor, I don't know if he like 3D prints them or whatever, but like
they must have gotten a deal.
Every event he's handed out a key. The key,
they found a crate of them.
Has wildly deflated.
Keys to the video store.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk to you off screen about the video store. But we're constantly trying and sometimes failing and sometimes succeeding in the belly of this horrible beast to resurrect a sustainable form of local journalism. And it's not easy and it's not forever. And I similarly have become incredibly embarrassed to be like, I do. I never call it a Substack. You know what I mean? Like that's become like the prevailing nomenclature for when you do a newsletter. You're like, I write a Substack. It's like, no, I write a newsletter on a platform called Substack. I don't associate myself with Substack in any way, but you can't get away from it. Like I've been looking at the alternatives, and like they seem like they're better. That for where we're at, some of them like Beehive might be a better deal, but it's like it's so risky to even just try it because like you could just botch the transition and lose like your entire audience and not be able to get people back. So it is a little bit like Substack is doing the enshittification thing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the
I was just going to bring that up, Bill. What you and Joanne were describing kind of sounds like phase 1, 2, and maybe 3 of the enshittification process. Could I spell out what those are?
Sure, yeah.
Phase one is be good to your users to acquire them and lock them in. Phase 2 is screw your users so you can be good to business customers. Phase 3 is screw everyone and take all the money for yourself. I have condensed those, or I've written them in my own words, but that is essentially what Cory Doctorow argues are the 3 stages of enshittification. That sounds a lot like I got on this platform. I don't pay for it. To get off of it, I would have to pay for it. It sounds a lot like, the same kind of race to the bottom that all of this stuff is. And it makes me think also when you all talk about, what some of these other alternatives are that are not maybe on a cooperative or collective type model, what's to say that you don't take that huge risk only to find out that the next platform you go to does the exact same fucking thing? This is what for-profit platforms do, all of them.
Or it could just shut down. I mean, this is like, do you just bounce from one to the next? It's
right. I mean, and all of it, like the enshittification process is all sort of based on like the subsidy of venture capital funding first, which makes it appealing because the company doesn't really have to make all that much money. And
they don't have to make any. They can in fact lose tons and tons of money.
Right. And then once they have to be like viable on their own, then, you know, what I'm like, I don't know, maybe my prediction for journalism in 2025 is Substack raises that 10% thing to something ridiculous. Like, and if that happened, I'd just be like, fuck. Like, I need to get a job. You know, if they raised it up to like 30% or something like that, then like, I don't think I can keep living off of it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's entirely possible because people are now using Substack for the social features, which only in the past year really took off. And that's when I started getting a little worried because I saw how many people were using it like a Twitter alternative, and it's being used that way by this community, and you're missing an entire secondary conversation that might be happening about these articles or newsletters going out. And it's really locking in certain communities, and certain communities, like, they just don't have a presence on the other newsletter platforms at all. So it's tough.
Yeah, the social media element, it's like a worse Blue Sky in that it's even more insular and sort of like navel gazy for writers. But like, it's not even writers talking about good writing anymore. I've noticed it's writers being like, what are your best content marketing strategies that you think really work? Or like, I saw some like flagrant, what is it called? Engagement bait, where it was like, what's your favorite Substack with less than 50 followers? Share it with me and I'll reshare it. And it's like, wow, man, this is really gross. Like, people are just trying to game the social media algorithm of Substack like they used to be able to do with Twitter and can do with YouTube and stuff like that. Like the sort of like Mr. Beast logic of it all.
Thank you to all the like maybe 10 people who have followed me personally on Substack. Thank you for genuinely to the people who follow Worcester Sucks. But just so you know, you're never going to see me do anything. Like, I'm never going to use that platform in that way. So thanks for the follow, but don't expect much at all.
Right. Joanne, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about ties into this, and like the long, slow death of Twitter. And like, you sound like a dork saying what I'm about to say. And I kind of hate that I have to say it out loud, but it's in service of a point. Like, Twitter used to be like important for like journalists and writers. And like, there was actual community that got formed on Twitter and like actual connections made. Like, I have met people and like made friends with them via that platform. There's a lot of writers that I wouldn't know that I do because of it. And the same goes for local political organizing in our city. And I'm sure in other cities, I just can't speak to those cities. In our city, there was a thing called Worcester Twitter. Like, no one said it out loud or acknowledged it, but like, it was like an actual sort of like organizing community that like got everyone on the same page. And that has just been completely shattered to smithereens. And the attempt to bring that over to Blue Sky has not gone very well. You know, it's sort of like it's stuck in like a liminal space or a limbo between the two platforms. You've written about Blue Sky, and I read it in preparation for this interview for Filmmaker Magazine. And honestly, I got to be honest, most of the stuff flies right over my head about like the internet organizing principles or whatever. But like, the basic question that you pose, like, is there a way to sort of recreate that community forming element of what Twitter was before it got sabotaged. Like, do you think it's possible, and is Blue Sky the answer?
Well, I mean, the first thing I want to say is I am a little bit cynical about Blue Sky for a lot of reasons. And one is that it got this reputation, deserved or not, as like good Twitter. So you have like a kind of, I don't know, like a Trekley element to some of the posts on there. And the vibes are a little bit off. Like, it's not just that it's mimicking Twitter, it's like the vibe on Blue Sky is sometimes very off. Not to say that the vibes were great on Twitter, but it was at least like people knew what they were in for when they were posting there. And like Twitter was founded almost 20 years ago. It's had many moments. So, and it speaks of like how a very simple idea could actually create so much through like the creativity of its own users. The simple idea here was just like broadcasting messages and getting a message out to many people. And I remember when I first heard about Twitter, I was like, well, we already have blogs, we already have text messages. I don't really get what this is for. There was something called Dodgeball where you could this was another app that was popular around this same time where you could post that you're in a bar and all of your friends would get a notification. They could join you or not. And you could be like, hey, we're going to see a Celtics game at this bar. And it's just your close friends would get it. So there were all these other apps happening in that 2006, 2007 moment. So Twitter wasn't obviously this great idea that would break through. But because it was so simple, because it could be used for so many things, it did. And it did slowly. It took about 2 years before you started seeing growth. When it really took off, what I noticed it was taking off was around the time of the 2008 election. That it was just a lot of people were, for good reason, following the presidential election. Reporters, because there wasn't this media saturation yet, if you were the one guy at NPR who had a presence on Twitter, you would be pretty legit in that crowd. So your tweets about Obama might have been floated around and retweeted a little bit more extensively than someone who was just a rando, but those randos also became media figures because of this strained ecosystem. And then you just had groups in general taking to it, comedians, of course, and communities. And the search function was really, really good. So if you did search for Worcester, you'd come up with people talking about stuff happening in Worcester. Mm-hmm. And that's when we talk about film Twitter, Worcester Twitter, politics Twitter, and all these communities taking part there, it all was because the search function was great. And it was easy to see people talking to each other and who they were amplifying through retweets. It was just very free flowing and it also didn't feel like a great investment of following someone on Twitter wasn't the same as friending them on Facebook. It's just okay, you got some posts that might be interesting to me. I'll just follow you. It's so low stakes to follow someone. And
you're not going to see pictures of my kid and unless I want you to.
Yeah. But I think on the other hand, that same format of broadcast, you can see where something that became really low stakes, that became very casual, that you could tell stupid jokes and have fun on it. It's still if you have that broadcast capability and it's so easy to just get a message out, that's when you get these corporate communications moving in, that this is a more official channel to get a message to as many people as possible. It took the broadcast function, how it could direct traffic to news stories just by building up those follower accounts. And I think one of the things that I see Blue Sky as perhaps one of those somewhere down the line is going to trip people up it's that Blue Sky is kind of formalizing your followers, that if you have this like kind of like follower count that you can take wherever you go. So if you go to a new app, if you go to a new app in the Blue Sky ecosystem, your followers go with you. Unlike if you go from Twitter to Blue Sky, you lose your followers. You can't take those with you. It's like the portability of how if you take your Substack followers to Beehive, that theoretically, if all works great, you do have all of your subscribers subscribe to your next newsletter. The tricky thing is they're talking about it in this terms of like forever following. That makes me a little bit anxious when it comes to, it makes me a little uneasy when it comes to social activity on a platform as an individual, as opposed to a publication who wants to maintain their subscribers or readers. So
right.
To the New York Times, say, New York Times digital team, having a platform where they know their following is consistent, their readership is consistent, that's terrific. To an individual, do you necessarily want every single person that you have let see your posts maintained throughout your entire life from the age of 9 months to 99 years old? Like, I don't necessarily think that's like good community basis. There's something I want there to be a little bit more ease and porousness and potential for reinvention that you get in typical social networks, that you can just kind of like reinvent yourself a little bit more. But that's kind of like the nitty gritty that I get into in my piece, that but right. At least I highlight it though to like point out that an organization and an individual are using the same platform the same way in many ways, but have very different goals when they're on these platforms.
Yeah. I couldn't help but think of the perfect example is the Wendy's Twitter. That was sort of like late stage Twitter being like, it was like, haha, the Wendy's guy talks like we do, you know, and it was like everyone thought that was so funny. I'm very stupid, so I need you to back up and explain like you would to a small child what this forever followers thing is. How does that work? What so you I need to explain to me like a very
so I've just been saying forever followers because that's like just how I've been phrasing it, but it's more that like when you have a Blue Sky account, if there is like an equivalent of Instagram within the Blue Sky ecosystem, the AT protocol, the app protocol, or app proto, what they call the protocol, your followers are there throughout the ecosystem as this user identity. They stay with you. And it's just like, there's something about that, this being like the selling point for this social network. At the end of the day, it is still a social network, that I can't give you like a serious threat that's like, this happens and you're going to die. No, I don't have something like that. That's like really high stakes that I can scare people with. But I can say personally right now, that makes me uneasy. And it's not like the web, which they're like, this is just like the World Wide Web. No, it's not. Like the World Wide Web is a lot more relaxed, and like you can set up a website, you can take it down. You don't have this like following either. Like the following thing, this is like a new, this is genuinely a social media thing. You'd started out in the very beginning of the internet. It's not like you have like this address book with your uncle and your babysitter. It's like, no, it wasn't like that at all. These followers, this all came out of the Web 2.0 era, that even like forum culture in the 90s, you didn't follow people. You just like went to a forum and you saw them. So this weird, like this is part of the reason I'm uneasy is it's kind of like, it is the Mark Zuckerberg mindset of like mapping all connections and having this like sense of like being able to see everything through the network of connections. And like,
Right.
that's like the Mark Zuckerberg gaze. And so when we have these like followers, I mean, you have an equivalent as a magazine, like subscribers to your magazine in the 90s.
Right.
You have that equivalent of like, you set up a newsletter. There were newsletters in the 90s that people would subscribe to, and you'd have the whole list of email addresses that you could see. But this moment of like having followers or not, they're creating a currency out of people as a person, not necessarily an organization with a readership. To me, it just feels like bad news. And again, I can't scare you with any examples, but it feels something's not right there.
I think like, here's, I think, if I'm understanding this correctly, here's one that I can think of. In a past life, I used to do a lot of pro-privacy, anti-surveillance work. And a thing I would always tell people is you don't have to be breaking the law, although a lot of people do. You don't have to be breaking the law to not want literally everyone to know what you're doing. Everyone does something or some things that they wouldn't necessarily want everyone in their life, including, let's say, their employer, for example, to know about. And I think like a very easy way to think about this is, would you want everything that you say on a platform to now be easily accessible to the same people who run what would be the equivalent of your Facebook or your LinkedIn or your Instagram or whatever? Because I wouldn't. That doesn't sound very appealing to me. I want those to be different audiences if I want them to be. I'm imagining a scenario, maybe you're in recovery and that's a thing you wrote about a whole bunch on Blue Sky, and now that's all that work is now linked to what is now your Blue Sky version of LinkedIn. And like, now your prospective employers can read all about, these like personal struggles. I mean, it's just an example, but like that sounds scary to me. I can absolutely see why that's not great.
Yeah, like the extent to which things are public on Blue Sky. I mean, it's not like immediate when you log in, you see all the information. But if you just like dig in and find certain apps, any user, you can see who they're blocking and who blocks them. Like that's all public because it's created kind of like a blockchain wallet. Like they're all like Web3 people behind this company. And they're doing these like so much of it is transparent in a way that like, I don't necessarily think it's helpful for anyone to know who you block and who blocks you. Like that's not
right.
In fact, like that could be pretty dangerous in the wrong hands. So there's just a lot about that app. But I don't necessarily know that being hypercritical of it now is useful because I don't know that that behavior of broadcasting the way that Twitter had for what's almost 20 years now is a forever online activity. I don't know if we're having this moment of like, this is forum culture in the 90s. The way that we were organizing before is already on the decline, and like something like Blue Sky carrying it through to maybe its natural endpoint that we do move to something a little bit more ad hoc and more to the experience that forum culture had been, where you go someplace and you are part of a community there, but you don't have to follow anyone. In fact, I like with the political situation the way it is, I mean, excuse for everything, but a very valid excuse. It's like, I don't really want to be under these like rules of more chaotic entities. And like, I don't want to be under like Facebook's rules or I just don't need another chaotic organizing body in my life right now.
Right. And it traps you into, I can't remember exactly how you put it, but it was great. Like the Zuckerberg lens, I think is what you said. And this idea of sort of like forever followers, like a blockchain sort of thing where like, it seems to me like that's a road to amplifying the very Twitter, but also sort of Instagram rooted new social relation thing that's entirely based on follower count. So making that more institutionalized and like more tied to your person than any platform, like would to me seem like it would really escalate that sense that your social self-worth is tied to the amount of people you've accumulated in this sort of like increasingly vague like follower category. Like in order to be somebody or to make a name for yourself, you have to like play this game. Like what better way is there to like lock people into the enshittification process than like literally the social credit score of having like a follower, like being like measured analytically by the number of followers you have.
So can I tell you guys a story about the other reason that this model makes me uncomfortable, and that is that the rules of engagement are constantly changing. This is my Canadian bacon story, and this happened recently, just a few weeks ago, when the tariff war with Canada was announced. I was making a joke with a friend of mine in which I posted the trailer. I attempted to post the trailer to the film Canadian Bacon. People who haven't seen it, you're really missing out. Please watch it. It's amazing. But it is a comedy film about a basically cold to kind of hot war between the United States and Canada. It's a comedy. It's a goof movie. Facebook rejected the link and warned me that it was rejecting the link as offensive content. And so I was unable to link the trailer to the comedy film Canadian Bacon because Meta had decided that it was offensive for me to do so. Go figure. So like, what even are the rules to your social credit score? When will they change? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. So like, I don't even know what the censorship would be. It's just like bacon, you know, I don't know.
It was just like Canada stuff is scary right now. So block it, I guess. I honestly don't know. And obviously you don't get an explanation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is sort of a way that like a private company could really discipline the discourse en masse. You know what I mean? Like,
sure is.
Like, a not too distant future to imagine is Elon Musk's Doge recommends that like the term trans be fucking shut off.
Yeah.
You know, or like
we already see it all over social media. Like people are talking about unaliving. People are crossing out the word Nazi or killing or genocide in images. It's already, there's already so much censorship happening because even if they don't literally remove your content and ban you, they demonetize it, or they put it in a shadow place in a walled garden where no one can see it. People are already self-censoring.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so glad that this conversation hasn't gone away, because for a while the right had really taken over the word censorship, especially in a tech platform sense. And it goes back to like the early years of the internet where they're just like, Google News is biased and we need, you should have Breitbart and Google News. It's this valid news source if you've got NPR. And like, they have consistently accused tech media and social media of bias. But we can see right now that this, with the example of X in particular, how much effort is required for the user to have like a basic conversation because certain words aren't working, because the links are being shadow banned. And I feel like a little bit frustrated that the conversation wasn't really being had at a time that we could have made an impact, that like at any time someone could have been like, what happens if Mark Zuckerberg stops being just a normal dweeb and like actually has some dangerous perspectives and like puts his company, which he has unbelievable control over, in it, like as a force to just reinforce his own politics in addition to worldview. And the idea that I always want to like make sure is present, even if it's like super utopian. It's like there should have been a PBS for social media. There should have been these should have been public broadcasting, run like libraries, run as like public non-commercial entities to do the work that something like Twitter does, that something like Facebook does. And it's really to all of these like worst case scenarios have just like been amplified to an enormous extent in what we're seeing this year.
Right. Yeah. In pretty short order. I mean, I was flipping back through my copy of your book, Lurking, which was written in 2020 or was published in 2020, probably written before 2020. But the conclusion is I took a picture of it to sound really prepared and smart. It's in the Google Doc that I'm looking at. But you do write about this concept of like how the internet desperately needs and does not have sort of like a librarian, people who tend to it like librarians. Instead, the internet remains imperfect, a hell that is fun, ruled by idiots and thieves, providing users with slingshots for self-expression, but no shield from the bile that rebounds. That you could not describe 2025 internet better than that. I mean, one of those thieves is like in the White House, extending that thieving to the federal government. And it's just crazy. But a few lines before that, you wrote about something that me and Chris talk about all the time. And like,
I was hoping you'd get to this.
Yeah. So you write, a public internet alone won't save us. A decentralized internet itself won't protect us. More than that, what users need are non-commercial, localized systems of feedback, mutual aid, and accountability. Commons, guarded with respect to user consent and privacy. Chris and I, since we started this podcast, since the election, have really been talking about localized, basically self-defense networks, community support, how to sort of refocus our politics and the way that we relate to the world on like a sort of a local level that is built on taking care of one another, which is the complete opposite of what our platforms for using the internet are doing right now. I mean, I think it's fair to say that like the platforms we're using right now, like really incentivize hating your neighbor.
Well, they're incentivized for like not engaging with a neighbor, but engaging in the world at scale, which just does not make sense to any human being. That's just like not how we orient ourselves in the world, digital or not. So like, even though something I've written a lot about in addition to the book is like how the word community has been distorted by the internet, and especially Mark Zuckerberg, that like you can't have a community of the entire world. That's like the most absurd way of like defining, even if you're going into like this Musk brained sense of like interplanetary humanity, like no, when we're talking about the population of the Earth, like that's not a community. And so people are engaging at scale, and so much. I mean, I actually get I get a little bit frustrated with some of the conversations about internet use and social media use, where like certain problems are not going to be present in local spaces as they are on Facebook. For example, beheading videos. If you have a community of 500 people who all know their names in Worcester, Massachusetts, everybody basically can find each other's address and phone number. someone isn't going to go in there and start like posting beheading videos and like threaten people with like murder. Like
Yeah,
maybe there
right.
will be one person, but you will know who that person is and be able to like organize your way around them.
You're right.
That happens all the time on Facebook because there is no community. It's not like a community of the globe. There is no community where people are accountable to each other. And I felt a little bit frustrated. I'm happy you read that passage, because I feel like in a few critical reviews of the book, they were like not getting what I meant by like accountability in neighborhoods that like does not translate to scale. Like
Right.
you just can't like, and even these like free form, even if you think of it as like communities on the level of groups inside of Facebook, well, I mean, that's not the same as self-organizing and having ultimate control over writing the rules for your community, expressing the local knowledge through a local community that happens to be online. And that's why at the end of the day, Mastodon is ridiculous. And I still feel like while it is a great effort to get involved, like so much of the potential is there, at least compared to every other platform. You do have the opportunity to create instances that are local and organized by a genuine community, as opposed to like a tech distorted idea of community.
Right. I mean, that's sort of the number one goal I have in doing this local journalism is to rebuild an alt weekly, because I think that, and we've talked about this before, but like alt weeklies did a specific thing for the community of a city, right? For a city or a neighborhood, a sense of self in a community forum. Like alt weeklies were really, really important for that in a way that like even like the Metro desk of newspapers couldn't really quite catch. But in this new media ecosystem and just like the social relations of social media, it's like like there needs to be like a social network for cities, like for regional, local social network that's not so like beholden to these corporate interests that like want you to be as atomized as possible. Is there any chance of that being built? Do you know of anyone trying to do that? Are there examples of things that are close? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there is some like statewide in Vermont. I forget what it's called, but like it's been around for ages. And apparently it's just like a state equivalent of Nextdoor, but not like Nextdoor, because it's just been like I'm fairly certain it's a nonprofit. I don't know a lot about this particular group, but I know if you look at Vermont's forums, you'll probably find what I'm talking about. And yeah, I think like what you're doing is an example of at least being community, like building community from an actual local local position, as opposed to just like, you know, being someone in Washington, D.C. who wants to found all this community journalism and doesn't really know doesn't have any sense of who are the good people at it, and who just like arrived here from New York 5 months ago and just wants to change. Like that's it's got to come from the actual community itself. It's got to be someone who has an authentic stake in this, because I think there is too much kind of fetishization of community news that's happening from a lot of nonprofits that might not be as robust as they were a couple of years ago. But like, I mean,
well, it's like the Report for America thing, where it's like, what if we just drop off a bunch of fresh college grads in like Arkansas?
Yeah.
That'll fix it. We'll catch the next Trump that way.
Yeah, that's how it works. The people who can tell you the most about a community are people who just got there. and have no life experience.
But like it just seems to me that like the utopian and what I liked most about the book was you run through everything that's wrong and remains to be wrong. It continues to be wrong rather with the internet, but offer up this sort of like utopian ideal at the end. Like it really could just kind of be more like the library, it could be like there is a public commons that the internet could provide that is like analogous to the library. And you hold up Reddit and Wikipedia as sort of two examples of platforms that are different from rub against the grain of where we're heading. And at the time, I thought when I was reading it, I think I wrote it down and I could find it in a notebook. I wrote Worcester Wikipedia ? Like,
yeah.
You know how video games,
Yeah.
you know how video games have like their own like nerd fandoms will make wikis for the video game that go into like crazy detail that normal Wikipedia would never even touch. Like I was like, I need to look up how to start a wiki and just like put all of my articles and all the articles that I read into like a Wikipedia format. And then I was like, man, that's way too much work for me to do. But do you see, when you hear that idea, do you think that it's totally insane, or is there something there? Like, is Wikipedia something that could be localized?
I actually think like a local versions of Wikipedia might be more sustainable than Wikipedia itself, because Wikipedia it has been remarkably robust for as long as it has, but it is also subject to, it depends on volunteer labor. And at some point, I mean, what worries me is that as reliable sources become more scarce, as AI generated news stories become more prevalent and difficult to distinguish from legitimate news, it's a lot of upkeep. And this is where it is an organization at scale. I mean, there's a lot I love about Wikipedia because it is non-commercial and it is decentralized, and it's complex, but like I almost feel like what Wikipedia does well almost could be more successful through a local organization that is more dependent on cooperation on a local level. That cooperation in a community is a lot easier than cooperation globally. And so, and then, you know, as I say, like there are a lot of risks with volunteer labor. I mean, I'm someone who writes on nights and weekends. I mean, I'm that cliche that we keep seeing on various platforms, like find something you love and do it for nights and weekends for the rest of your life. I mean, that's definitely me and my writing. And it's just like, so when I see people get a little bit touchy about free labor, volunteer labor, especially in media production, I also want there to be some perspective here that like, we don't want this to not exist. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of great sources of money for any kind of arts, publishing, creative endeavor whatsoever. They're probably throwing money at really bad stuff, to be honest. Like all of the organizations I know that have money are spending it in like the worst possible places right now. So if you want to have a creative life, there is going to be some aspect of that operates outside of traditional understandings of what you're. I'm basically saying like a paycheck, like necessarily, like there is something that there's work that I do that I will only ever be paid for, and there's work that I get something from, and I I think all of us are probably at the stage of reevaluating what that is to you. Like, what is the work that you can only do for, say, X number of dollars an hour? And then what is the work that you're getting something out of it and you're putting, it has value in the world. And how can you do this without exploiting other people while being still like operating within a fair collaborative space? That it's messy, but at the same time, I just can't it's too grim to imagine a world that like only art and media will exist if people can afford to make it. Because I think like my books, I obviously don't come from money. I don't have money now. I don't come from the traditional kind of media background of a New York journalists
Sure.
tend to have. And throughout my career, I've had to really take on financial risks that someone who did go to Columbia Journalism School will never understand. And it's also like having faith in my own perspective as being unique and necessary, and not kind of repeating what more traditionally funded media typically says. That's the other part of it.
Yeah.
I think there's like also an intrinsic value or some intrinsic value to this sort of work being decommodified. I think like Bill, I think you found a way to share it in the newsletter. Bill and I are both big fans of a podcast called True Anon. They started putting out a newsletter every week for paid subscribers, and
it's so much better than mine. I hate that.
I won't agree with that. It's different. It's different.
It makes me mad. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. Where I wanted to go with that is we both read, and I think we're really struck by this one in particular that their producer wrote about tinkering. And I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time explaining like what it what it says or what it doesn't say, but it sort of talks about like what is the value to you to have something that you tinker with, and how like what your tinkering project can be and cannot be. And one of the core tenets of it was that your tinkering is not a job. Like it's not work you get paid for. And it's not something, it's not something you do for, food, shelter, and clothing. It needs to exist outside of that. And I think like labor that you do because you want to has a value for you and for the product that you put together that is different than labor that you have to do to pay your rent. It just is.
Yeah, it's the basic craft of it. It's like when you're writing something that you really are juiced on, then it's like a way different experience for the writer and the reader, I'd say, and then like writing something that you have to write is like, I don't know. I can spot the difference.
I can also say like I've been thinking about that too, with like just in terms of books that I like, the book I'm writing right now, where it's like when I'm passionate about something, I want that to come through to the reader. And like we have hard lives, we have like busy lives. To be able to focus on a book, you need to focus on your writing first and make sure that that focus is being transferred to the reader, that you can exist in this space that does not have all this distraction, that you can like kind of exist outside of time when you're reading a book. Like that is, it comes through in like reported stories too. But like for as much as people complain about like, oh, cell phones are killing books, that's not, they're killing like shitty books. Like they're killing
right.
books, but like we're not written with like a great deal of care. If you're locked in, you're trying to bring someone to like, it's a little cheesy to say, but it's like, I try to imagine as like, this is a dream that I have that's so vivid that someone else can join me in this dream space. And like, that's what a good book should do, that it's like such a convincing dream in nonfiction or fiction that someone can join you in that space and someone's going to want to. Because lately, like books are like books are always in crisis, but I really feel like publishing is in some really messy moments right now.
Yeah.
And authors are really freaking out, but it's also just like, you can't get people to like feel sorry for you and buy your book. They have to want to join you in this dream. And that's why it's just like bringing up that like a book is actually like one of the greatest experiences that you can have. And when moments like this are happening, where you click on the news and like Elon's had another baby or something, and I was like, shut the fuck up. I just want to like exist in like someone else's dream and like join them there.
Elon Musk, any billionaire out there, if you're listening to this, the past iterations of you used to fund the arts and fund culture, and
yes,
the form of the novel, the form of the long form nonfiction essay is some of the highest forms of art that exist. If I had a universal basic income, I could just do that every day without having to worry about my rent, I would literally do that. I'd like what I am doing right now is the closest to what I would be doing every day if money wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Robber barons.
Unfortunately, Elon Musk, if he was going to donate his money into the arts, we're just going to get like thousands of Rick and Morty iterations.
Yeah. All right. What if we do Rick and Morty now, where it's in the other multiverse? Yeah. Timeline B, Rick and Morty. Timeline C, Rick and Morty. Yeah, you're right. Maybe we don't want them picking and choosing who gets to do art. But Joanne, we're at time. We got to let you go. Before we let you go, is there anything that you'd like to plug or?
Plug my books. Like I think both of the books are through the Worcester Public Library. And my website is joannemcneil.com. You can find some of my other writing there. And I'm really happy to be here. I am such a fan of your newsletter, Bill, and this is such a cool project, and it was really great to talk to you both.
Yes. Well, Joanne, thank you so much for joining us. I will personally recommend go buy Wrong Way and Lurking right now. Don't do anything else. There will be links in the show description. And Joanne, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to come and speak with us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
The government knows. The government knows. The government knows. The government knows.
That's sick. Do you want to open with that?
Open with
the thing, the things, the spaces to bring back.
The government knows. The government knows. The government knows.
Oh, yes. I just want to talk quickly about the research that I did into Front Porch. Which I'm still getting messages from friends who are on Front Porch. I just got one the other day that'll definitely be the one that I'll share, where someone put up a post looking for a dog igloo, and a bunch of people reached out to her in what seems like a nice way to be like, dog igloos are not really like good, safe things for your dogs to be outside in the Vermont winter. And the woman wrote back to be like, thank you so much for your concern for my animals. I mean this sincerely. Since there was so much concern, I wanted to clarify and say that this isn't for my dog. It's actually for a possum that is on my property, and I keep putting out compost for it, but the crows keep stealing it. So, it's just a lot of great stuff like that. I wish we had that.
That's so sick. Not next door. What is it called?
It's called like Vermont Front Porch or the Front Porch Forum. I think it leaks a little bit into some surrounding areas, but mostly it is Vermont based. And so when Joanne couldn't exactly for sure remember, I did a little research to find it. And then I reached out to some of my friends and family in Vermont to say like, hey, I got a weird question, but have you ever heard of this weird thing? And every single one got back to me and were like, oh my God, yeah, I use it all the time. It's awesome. it's really funny, and also if you have something to like buy or sell or give away, like it's you can find that stuff there. And when I find out that when free hot yoga is at the library and like all kinds of stuff, I had some friends tell me that about this big controversy that happened a couple years ago, where a rumor got around that Eminem was going to play at like the gazebo in some small town outside of Burlington or something. It wasn't real, but people were talking all over. It was like a big conversation. And then this story that and then these friends were like, "Here, take my login. Like, you got to see this shit." And so I poked around some, and then this great example came to me just a few days ago from a friend about the dog igloo.
Yeah, the dog igloo is so sick. Of using it for possum purposes, it's amazing. I
hey, I understand it's not good for dogs, but I have a possum I'm trying to keep healthy. So actually, it's for a possum.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 apartments ago, I had a very funny encounter with a guy who was across the sort of shared driveway, sticking a flashlight through the fence. And then all I can see is the hand in the flashlight, right? And then I just hear, hey, buddy, you seen a possum around here? Looking for my possum. He was trying to put out some tuna for his possum. And he goes, he loves pecans. And I was like, buddy, I love pecans. Those things are like $10 a pound. I am not sharing
put those on my side of the fence.
I am not sharing my pecans with a possum. Solidarity only extends so far. Chris, can you just explain to me and to the listeners, like, what the layout of Front Porch is? Is it like a forum? Do people have accounts with their names on it, or how does it work?
It is a forum, and I can share a screenshot that we can link to.
Sure.
If you're not logged in, I don't think it shows you much, but it is a public forum. So people sent me posts that that they weren't like sharing confidential stuff or whatever. But most of the ones I've seen. So when you register, the reason I couldn't register is because you have to register with an address,
right?
And it means if you're in its area. I don't know if you have to give them your full name or just your first name. But the way I saw people would show up would be like, Tom P from Springfield. Then within that, it looks like, people get like a daily, or weekly, or however it works. Periodically, they get like an email that has some top forum posts, but then you can actually log in and like go into the forum and make a post or, respond and things like that. So it seems like people use it both ways. And everyone told me they use it regularly, that it's actually like very active and very helpful. I don't know if they do ads or not. I haven't seen any. But otherwise, like, it doesn't seem like it costs money or anything like that.
That's sick. I gotta check that out. Screenshots would be really helpful, because it seems like it's kind of hard to log into. But like, can you imagine like I feel like in my ideal world, the Worcester Public Library runs like a simple forum, or just a microblogging text role that you have to be a Worcester resident to have an account, and you sign in and it's free and it's very simple. And I feel like that would quickly become like the hottest page in the city, because we have everything right now is very siloed off along sort of like the normal ideological feeding tubes, right? So like you have your crank Facebook page, and then you have like your more progressive-y political Facebook page. And then you have a whole separate conversation going on Twitter, and then another one now on Blue Sky. And it's just like, it's all over the place. Everyone is Everyone's working off of a different narrative, and that's not the best. Whereas, it reminds me it reminds me sort of like before Facebook really tweaked their algorithm, like back in like, I don't know, 2013, 2015, probably up to about, I don't know, probably the pandemic. It was way easier to like see everything that was going on in the city and what people were posting about back then.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just completely shattered now. Like Facebook's like almost unusable. So it would be a worthwhile project. That in my Worcesterpedia, like if there was like a hacker collective that wanted to try to get something going, I'd happily give that as much juice as I can.
And we talk in the interview about, why that is probably a good way to think about it and focus it, like building a worldwide social community. It just isn't tenable. Like, I don't think we have to hypothesize that now. We can see what it looked like, and it didn't really work. And also a thing we don't talk about just for time in the interview is how, for example, Facebook has spurred like ethnic conflicts in countries in Africa and things like that. It has actually been a force for bad in places that are documented and written about. But yeah, I think a project like that would be really cool. And I sort of think like one of the things so I asked my friends about this front porch one. I was like, are there like topics that are off limits there? Like, is it like a no politics space or whatever? And they said, no, definitely not. Really, the only thing you can't do there is like directly attack other users. But they said, interestingly, it doesn't really get used for like big screeds about national politics. And actually what it often is like somebody being like, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm running for town council. Like, this is what I want to bring to the table and stuff like that. I've been sort of thinking about it as like, if we could intentionally create a space like this, I think we could, not you and I, but like as a community, we could also control its tenor by the way it's used. Like, I always think of this as like what I call the dispensary effect, where you walk into the dispensary and it smells like weed and everyone there is a little high and the music's usually pretty good. And like everyone's just a little nicer in the weed dispensary than they are other places. Like, I've never seen a shouting match at a weed dispensary ever.
2 points there. I think that so much of the toxicity on Facebook, which is where all of sort of the real reactionary local stuff comes from, really, is because it exists in a wider community of people who are allowed to be as like psychotically reactionary as they want to, and we'll have like an endless flow of like you go on those pages and you just see like people dumping shit out of their meme folders that they have obviously cultivated from being on way more of those sorts of pages than just, the truth about Worcester official. And it gets crazy, and every single town has one. I remember when there was like a truck caravan protest of a Haitian migrant hotel in Gardner. So I, like any good gumshoe would, I requested a bunch of the Gardner Facebook pages to like get some information about it, see how people were talking about it. And it was a fucking dumpster fire. And it's very encouraging to hear that a place that is not on Facebook but is open to everyone in the community. And upstate Vermont's probably no less crankified than central Massachusetts, but that doesn't happen there really is very interesting. And it reminds me of one of the things that Joanne was talking about in the interview about early Twitter and what made Twitter work and what made it emerge as this like massive forum. At first was just like that it was very simple and allowed its users to imbue it with their own creativity. So like it took off on the strength of it being basic and easy to use. And I think that something that's basic and easy to use, but confined to a community, also leads to more creative and interesting, just like organic moderation practices.
Yeah, I think that's I think you're really onto something there, and that another way that I think about it with Facebook, which at this point I use as little as possible, is that it has just gotten like precipitously worse with that kind of stuff, precipitously worse. And that it's like also unavoidable. Like if you go on Facebook now and you just start scrolling down, within a few minutes, you're going to get advertised some, like, I don't know, like woke bourbon or some anti-woke bourbon, or get shown some page for, like God bless our troops USA #1, or like some other shit. It's like, it's unavoidable there. Yet all those, memes that people are pulling are just getting like splashed into their feed like incessantly. Right. And God forbid you actually follow one of the pages, then it's like all you're going to see. And I think it's interesting too, because Facebook has commerce. I don't really use it, but I know people that use Facebook Marketplace all the time. I have a couple friends who are like instrument collectors. They collect a number of things, but musical instruments is one of them. And they're constantly like, oh, I went 3 miles over there, and this old lady, Betty, had this banjo, and it was her husband, but he died, and like, oh, she gave me all these like cool old like Canadian Bluegrass Festival shirts, because what the hell is she going to do with them? And like, but those are completely siloed spaces from each other on Facebook. And a lot of these people who are the worst commenters that I see now have either entirely fake sock puppet type accounts, or accounts that are like very restricted. And I think something that changes the way that you interact with that stuff is like, if it's all in one space, you might not want to be, the Stephen A from your pretty small town who, screams about rounding up all the immigrants, and then 2 hours later you're one of the people who's asking for the free hay that somebody's got. Like, then you have to know people a little more completely, and you have to have a little more context for who they are as an entire person. And I think that naturally engenders different feelings about people.
Right. That just reminded me, I was listening to this podcast Doom Scroll yesterday, and the host, Josh Citronella, was talking about how, like, in his ideal world, like, there's one state social media, and you have to use your full name, and your picture is your driver's license picture. Like, you don't get any control over how you represent yourself, which is the same as real life. In real life, you don't get any control over how you represent yourself, really. And like, that would just naturally solve a lot of problems. And I do think that there is something to be said about that.
Yeah, I mean, something like that, right? And if that doesn't feel comfortable as like something you want to do in like a more subversive organizing space, then maybe that's not the place to do more subversive organizing space.
Plenty of other places.
But, like, yeah. I think having some actual accountability to who you actually are in a general forum type space is not a bad thing. Yeah.
So I've been reading in the weeks since we recorded this interview, I've been reading another really good book about the internet that I ordered sort of on a whim, just, after thinking about the talk we had with Joanne, and this book called Log Off by Catherine Cross. And it came out in 2023, and it deals mostly with Twitter harassment campaigns and sort of like the limits of political subjectivity and the limits of what you can accomplish politically with social media. The subhead is Why Posting and Politics Almost Never Mix. I'm about halfway into it, and the conclusion I keep coming back to, which I think is like worth saying out loud because it really has all along been like a defining sort of principle for how I've approached doing local journalism, doing this newsletter, is that there's no community that exists on social media platforms. It's just not real. That's not a real community. It is fake, and it is rent seeking. The only, but like that's a limiting way to think about it, because you can use social media very effectively to build real community, but the real community does not exist on the social media platforms. It's like the promise of the internet that we still have is that, you know, we're more interconnected than we ever have been. You can use that effectively to build stronger communities. You know, whether they be like artistic communities or like niche hobbies, but the one that we're principally concerned with is the community of a city, people who want a city to be better and want to organize around improving city politics and the state of the city. That's a really easy community to seize on because it's right there. They're just your fucking neighbors. And you can use social media really well to build that. But the forum for where that community exists simply cannot be any social media platform. It has to principally occur in real life. More real life events and social gatherings, and less believing that you're accomplishing anything by posting takes. That's the stake I'm putting in the ground right now. I think that we really need to get away from, I don't know, posting so much. And I think a lot of people are on that tip right now because we have a bunch of fucking sick events coming up.
Yeah, we do.
The one that, Chris, I know you're excited about, and I am also excited about, is sort of the perfect blending of politics and fun and hanging out, is the Worcester Havara's Purim Spectacular, which is a stage show, a political satire stage show that they will be putting on at the Hotel Vernon on Saturday. And I think it's going to probably be the highlight of the year so far in terms of stuff happening in the city. I'm so fucking jazzed on it.
Well, I that may well be, but it's going to. It already has some competition because let's not forget. The Roast of Worcester is the night before at the White Room.
Yeah, that's great.
Which I know you'll be participating in, and I will just be showing up and laughing and throwing tomatoes or whatever. Gonna need a lot of tomatoes for both of those nights. Stock up.
Yeah. The Roast of Worcester is on Friday at the White Room. I'm about halfway worked through my set, my stand-up set. I get to do stand-up comedy once a year, and it's for this. First time was terrifying, but it was also my best performance. I had some severe beginner's luck. My girlfriend told me that the second time was pretty bad compared to the first time. So I need to try to strike some middle ground here with the next one. But no, there's a bunch of cool, funny people. I believe, and we're far enough into the podcast now where I'll just say it free of consequences. If this is a surprise, Jimmy Cash is the headliner. That's going to be
word on the street.
That's going to be word on the street. I'm not sure about that. I just heard a rumor that Jimmy Cash is the headliner, and that's going to be really fun. So yeah, those two events this weekend make for a really, really cool weekend. And then later in the month, we have Tu Nguyen, who is not seeking re-election, but is staying in the game, so to speak. A birthday party at Mint that's also like a organizing and signature taking sort of like a political event for people to come, for candidates to come and get their signature papers filled out, which is a pain, and for just sort of mixing it up, which I think is really, mixing it up, chopping it up is kind of like more important than any city council meeting or vote, in my opinion. Because we're just so far away from having the sort of like real, really, really tight knit community that we kind of like need. So like there's definitely a political praxis in literally just hanging out and making space where hanging out happens. It's real. I don't know. I don't really know how to articulate that as much as I'd like to, but I really believe it deep down.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a stab at it and just say, as a longtime organizer, I have always found there is something that we lost during early COVID that we still haven't managed to get back, and this is where it feels like it's specifically where it lives. It's just kind of having this muscle memory of like, when there's something to do, or you could stay on the couch, of actually being like, you know what, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go pay, a couple extra bucks a beer, or a little more for my coffee or whatever. And I'm going to do that to go somewhere and be with people that I like to be around, doing something that I like to do. And then all of these other aspects of it, right? Like, I'm sure like, I'm going to have papers with me when I, at least at the Purim spiel. I'm probably not going to like get up in people's business about it, but if you see me, I've got papers for most of the candidates that I'm planning on collecting signatures for. So yeah, hit me up, get the paper signed. It's like another thing, we knock off the list, or maybe we have a conversation about, I don't know, what could juice up the chicken coop organizing or whatever. This is where we figure out our actual and kind of interrogate our actual commonalities in what we want to be seeing and working on. It's where we have fun together, and having memories of having fun with people and building trust with people really, really matters, because you're gonna what's on the horizon does not look like it's going to necessarily all be super fun or super easy to do. And it really helps if you trust and know and love the people that you're doing that work with. So I'm trying to get back into that habit more. I fully admit I fell out of it pretty hard. Spring is here. And I think it's a really good time for us to be meeting up and having those conversations and rebuilding that actual in-person sense of community that we have.
Exactly right. Couldn't think of a better way to put it, and couldn't think of a better way to end this episode. I think that this interview was one of my favorites, and I'm having a good time doing this podcast, man. I think it's fun. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm having a blast.
We'll be back with another episode soon. We have another exciting candidate interview. I won't spill the beans just yet, but we're going to see how posting 2 of these in a week goes. Whether people like that or they're like, wait, this is too much. Hopefully it's not too much, but we'll see. We'll play it by ear. The fun part about, local journalism being in the pits is that you really got nothing to lose by experimenting. And we really are kind of in a position where you do kind of have to just throw some shit against the wall and see what sticks. So yeah, Outdoor Cats will be back later this week. Thank you everyone for listening. If you're listening to us in an app, put a little 5-star review on there. Because why not?
Yeah. See you later, everybody.
The government knows. The government knows. The government knows. The government knows. The government knows when you masturbate. The government knows when you masturbate. The government knows when you feel alone and it's getting late and you're sitting at home, looking straight through your webcam, looking at you as Uncle Sam. Look him in the eyes with your balls in your hand and stick it to the f***ing bed. Stare at the screen when you unpack. The government is staring back.